Hello everybody, welcome to Nostalgia Goggles of Horror. This year I'm not getting in front of the camera because of my ghostly guest that's in every episode, which is the perfect representation of the medium itself of comics and how dead they truthfully are. So with that being said,
it is I, Olivia, the specter of the pages. Hello.
How long did that take you to think of that one?
On the fly, actually.
That was really good.
Thank you.
So with that being said, you're probably wondering why they're here. Are we going to be talking about some comic book stuff? Absolutely not, no. If you thought that one, you didn't read, so that means that this is on autoplay or you just watch whatever we upload. And if that is true, thank you.
Oh, yeah,
thank
you.
With that being said, though, today we're going to be talking about and asking the question, does Luigi's Mansion for the GameCube, does Luigi's Mansion hold up? The first game. I can't say for the GameCube because this is one of those ones of where we're doing an amalgam episode. Because in all truth, I don't think both versions stand alone on their own for me to do a separate episode. Plus, I don't think people would watch it. But with that being said, though, I am one of the few people that did not actually play Luigi's Mansion back in the day. And it's mainly because it felt odd for, me to play that game. I don't know, it just came out at such a weird time, and I am not one of the people that grew up with it. Instead, I had the choice between, I believe, Mario Party 4 and Star Fox with my GameCube, and I chose Mario Party instead. Luigi's Mansion wasn't even an option, for some reason, at that GameStop, but it's interesting. It's one of those games that came out, and then I was like, oh, Luigi with the vacuum, that's stupid. So I kind of see the question of, does this hold up for some people even today? Yes, there's 3 games, but I could see where people still just look at it like, oh, Luigi with the vacuum. So
gonna be honest, I was in the exact opposite camp. I grew up with Luigi's Mansion on the GameCube. I don't remember much about getting our family GameCube. What I do remember is that Luigi's Mansion was one of the first titles we had, and I tried it, and I was actually too scared to play it initially. I was a very sensitive child. So eventually my cousins came over and gave it a shot, and I went, I can do this. So
with that being said, instead of spoiling the whole episode, let's ask the question, is Luigi's Mansion still worth playing today?
So Luigi's Mansion story is where Luigi wins a mansion without actually entering a contest to win a mansion. Mario goes ahead and goes missing, and after Luigi comes to check it out, almost gets grabbed by the ghoulies, is rescued by Professor Egad, renowned ghost hunter and all-around ghost researcher and paranormal enthusiast. You find out that Mario has been captured by the ghosts of the mansion, and that's pretty much the entire story.
Can I cut you off here?
Yeah.
And say that I madly appreciate the fact that you said grabbed by the ghoulies, and I don't like how that sounds. I've never did. But I have to give you so much credit for throwing in a whole nother horror game that is very similar to Luigi's Mansion. It's more like Luigi's Mansion, but like you use every item in the house to whoop ass. But man, I gotta give you credit. It sounds disgusting, but God bless you for that.
No, thank you. I thought you'd like it.
I did, yeah.
So pretty much that's the whole story of Luigi's Mansion. Go in the mansion, rescue Mario, reclaim the portrait ghosts, find out what's going on.
Well, there is actually, see, that's the main story for the main game, but Luigi's Mansion DS had to pull some wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey shit because it introduces Luigi into the story that if you're playing on solo player, it doesn't matter, but...
Right. Luigi is only for co-op in the 3DS version, so it just has Professor Egad from the future dump off Luigi in your time for research purposes, and that's about it. This is also Luigi's first canon appearance.
Yeah. So what's great about this, right, is that means Luigi has, seen some shit. Now, I think the thing that's funny is a lot of people out there would be like, oh, well, that doesn't make sense. Time travel in Mario, what? But there was Partners in Time, and I believe, if I remember correctly, Egad is a huge part of that, which is part of the Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga series. So, yeah. Time travel is nothing crazy, but also, if Egad has this ability, oh man, I don't want to get into that. There's so much...
There is an untapped wealth of Professor Egad's temporal and ghost hunting shenanigans.
Real talk, Mario lore. Get on that. Get on that, Mario lore. Make an Egad character because there is so much untapped potential that only I think you guys can do. And if you don't know what Mario lore is, that's fine. Look it up, though. It's interesting. It might not be your cup of tea, but I feel like there's so much that they can do with EGAD as a character with the knowledge of how much wacky things he has done. So...
That being said, let's get in.
Look, hey, you dropped in Grabbed by the Ghoulie, so I had to drop the other one, so...
No, that's fair. That's fair. So with that being said, let's get into the gameplay.
So, fun fact, 1, this is not Luigi's first rodeo from a game, and even with that being said, Luigi has never had an normal kind of spin-off. From Mario's Missing to this, Luigi's always been in an odd place in the Mario world, and the reason why I say this is because Mario spin-offs are kind of traditional, right? Yoshi is kind of a platformer, Princess Peach is a platformer. I think Toad is a little bit more in the odd space, but still a platformer, where Luigi's Mansion is not a platformer. If anything, it is an adventure game that lives in, or that flirts with the concept of survival horror. And when I mean flirts, I mean like really loosely kind of like bats eyelashes, because you can say that's flirty all you want, but it really isn't at the end of the day. And the reason why I say this goes more into the presentation of the game, but we'll get into that in presentation. This game isn't like survival horror, mind you. There isn't the conserving and shifting of items. Instead, it's more of just exist in that weird realm, you know what I'm saying? But I think that that's interesting though. Luigi's Mansion is a game where you have to suck up ghosts. As you've heard in the story, you have to find Mario and a few Toads, of course, but at the end of the day, it's really you trying to find keys and get through the mansion and hunt boos and ghosts. That's really the whole deal.
Yeah, Luigi's Mansion is based all around the ghost hunting mechanic of go from room to room, find the ghost inside, and clear the room. Whether that is a regular group of ghosts, which you can usually just get by a combination of using your flashlight and the Poltergeist 3000, or your portrait ghosts. Portrait ghosts are similar to mini bosses, being a little bit more difficult than your regular run-of-the-mill ghost. However, portrait ghosts are a little quirky. They won't just give up their heart when you flash the light at them. You have to find out what's going to either bug them or get them to reveal their weakness so that you can suck them up first.
I really enjoy the portrait ghosts a lot. I mean, the regular ghosts are cool, but the portrait ghosts have a, once again, getting more into the presentation, but we'll get there, have a kind of aesthetic to them, and not only is the aesthetic important because that's what requires you to beat them, right? For instance, you know, one of the things is that the mom ghost doesn't like her hair getting messed with, so you have to open up the window. There's the music-loving ghost where you have to play music, you know. There's the ghost where you have to stop it from eating rice, you know. Simple things, but gimmicks that I feel work out very well and are nice and memorable and iconic.
Yeah, they present a puzzle-solving element that helps change up the gameplay than just point and suck.
I think the thing that also makes this game really great is just how interesting it feels. It's not the worst feeling game. It's not the best feeling game either, but I think that it feels smooth and solid. It feels like they worked on a concept and they kind of played it out. It does feel a little tech demo-y, but you know.
But Luigi's Mansion comes by that honestly, as it was a tech demo for the
convention Space World?
Yeah, for the Space World convention in 2000. It actually did win an award and was so successful that Nintendo developed it into a whole game.
Yes, and I think that realistically though, that this game definitely does show that it was worth something because we do have games within the future. The thing that's interesting about each Luigi's Mansion is they each have something that I can say claims to fame by itself, and this one actually is weirdly enough something that you would hear about in sequels, and that is the elements.
Oh yeah.
There's the elemental powers, I believe there's fire, ice, and water.
Yes.
And it's interesting because those are something that I feel like you would hear about in a sequel, but instead it is here. The game itself kind of goes above and beyond for having something like that in it. It's not the best used, mind you, or it's not the worst used either. It's okay, but it's something that I feel like you would hear about in a sequel. Like, for instance, Spyro got different breaths way later on, so you'd think Luigi's Mansion would have played with that, but no, they play with other things in the sequels. But I think all in all, Luigi's Mansion, the first one is super solid. I also like how capturing the ghost has a mechanic to it where you have to pull back and let go too, because if you just hold back the whole time, it'll start to slowly count down instead of like speedily doing it. You have to kind of fight with them, and one of the things you taught me is you have to sometimes let them take you, because if you don't, you'll get hit by a mushroom that comes out of them, or another ghost, because sometimes other ghosts accompany in battle. It's not super common, but that's how the main portrait ghosts work, and sometimes there's another gimmick to it, which is either shooting something at an enemy or using an element. Is that fair?
Yeah, there's several ways to get to the bottom of hunting a ghost. Sometimes it's shooting something back at them, sometimes it's just grabbing something. It's pretty easy to figure out.
Finish that.
Sorry. There are also, speaking of the elements, there are hyper-specific ghosts that need certain elements to be beat, but they are very rare. They play more into one of the other core things that Luigi's Mansion established, which is the treasure hunting aspect, where throughout the mansion you can find loads and loads of cash and jewels. The more you find, the better your score at the end of the game. And certain ghosts will drop better treasure if you can beat them, or if you take less damage.
Okay, one of the things that I wanted to reel back on and talk about is actually something that I do have a gripe with, and that is the shooting. Luigi's Mansion, for me, for some reason, it doesn't feel like it ever gets it perfectly right, but there is moments where you have to shoot back at ghosts, and I have had an issue in at least the GameCube version. The 3DS version I haven't had an issue with, but then again, I haven't been playing that one much, and that also might be for other reasons. But I feel like in the GameCube version, and it's not just the GameCube, in later Luigi's Mansion you'll hear me talk about this again, but I feel like the shooting of something just doesn't, I don't know if it's the space or not, but it just doesn't feel altogether there, so.
Yeah, to be honest, I've always blamed the dollhouse-like perspective for that, because I've struggled with it too. Not to mention, there is a weirdness where you have to rely on the C-stick to be able to aim and it's reversed from your regular control scheme.
Which is normal for GameCube, but it's
normal, but it's something I personally struggle with remembering.
And also, it's something that no longer is the case for today. It's something that made sense back in the day, because first-person shooters and shooters in general were commonly not put on consoles. It was more of a PC thing. Yeah. So to kind of program that, I think it was easier back in the day to understand that, but it's something that's now gone. It's no longer a thing anymore. So that's probably the issue.
Probably. That also explains why you have the option of sidestep controls. During the beginning of the game, you're given the option of choosing between two different control schemes. Sidestep is more tanky and probably would be a little bit better if you're used to games like Resident Evil. Me personally, I just use the regular straight-up control method that they give you to get started with.
Now, unfortunately, I haven't touched that one, so it's kind of hard to sit there and talk about it. As a person that has played Resident Evil on multiple occasions and does love Resident Evil, it might actually be better, but I have no clue, and that's kind of the failings of having these episodes be kind of timed. But I also don't see the purpose, because I think the main controls are fine. It's one of those things that you can definitely get used to, but if you're not, I'd just kind of recommend going for the 3DS version. With that being said, though, I do think that the gameplay is solid, and it definitely makes sense of why Luigi's Mansion continued onward.
No, definitely. But I believe we are getting ahead of ourselves a little bit.
Well, I mean, it's true. No matter how we look at it, yes, Luigi's Mansion did move forward.
Of course.
So, but that's not what we're asking. I didn't say if this one held up or not. Oh. So with that being said, though, let's move on to the presentation. So let's get right into the presentation. Luigi's Mansion is gorgeous. It's a game that kind of blows my mind when it comes to understanding what Mario is and what Luigi's Mansion is, and almost all of the games get that down. We'll talk about that later. But this one's aesthetic is unforgettable and kind of crazy that we're even here today, because this one is unmatched as well in aesthetic. The other games do not follow this one. And so this game becomes just kind of unforgettable. The GameCube version is great, but the 3DS version cleans it up, and damn is that beautiful.
Oh yeah, Luigi's Mansion, the original, is weirdly, bizarrely detailed in weird little places, and the 3DS only makes that better. The colors are richer, the details are more present. It's really impressive. It almost is like it is literally an entirely new mansion. I gotta say though, the entire aesthetic of the original Luigi's Mansion is unparalleled to me. The kind of creepy aesthetic is unparalleled to me. I love this game. I really will always sing the praises of the designs for the portrait ghosts, the irregular ghosts. Everything about it is a little bit off to the regular Mario aesthetic, and something about that I think really speaks to how charming this game is.
I will actually even agree with you that it's off, especially when you see characters like Boo and King Boo within this game. King Boo actually got a whole new upgrade from what he originally was in Mario. But it's interesting to see Boos, these tiny little creatures with the ghosts in Luigi's Mansion. And Luigi's Mansion definitely has their own type of ghost as time moves on. But I think that all in all, this one is majorly unforgettable. Another thing that I want to talk about with this game is actually it taking place in a mansion. The presentation of that is interesting because it invokes a lot of feeling towards Resident Evil, from how you enter the doors to how slow Luigi walks to realistically just kind of how the game exists. Both of them taking place in a mansion, both of them dealing with, you know, weird shit at the end of the day. So, you know. Now, when I say the comparisons to Resident Evil, it's very loose. It is very loose. Of course, a horror game in a mansion, oh no, that's normal. And I think those comparisons are what makes it kind of creepy and fun. And I'm mainly talking about the doors, how they have their own little animatic before you open them, which is something that carries over in later games. But I think that in truth is something that's really nice. There's a little bit of a tension to it. And I think the thing that makes that tension fun is that the game's not creepy, it's like Halloween creepy. It's like a trick-or-treat kind of creepy instead of it being a horror movie kind of creepy. It's nice, it's fun, and I feel like if you're younger, it might spook you a little.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Trick or treat, that kind of Halloween vibe is exactly what I think it sums up Luigi's Mansion.
Yes, I agree with you, but once again, like trick-or-treating, there's always going to be that one scary house that gets you a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. It's like, I also think that tension you spoke of plays really well with the music. Luigi's Mansion's soundtrack is ultimately, I would argue, the thing that gave me the most chills growing up playing this game. Its score is incredible. The music here, even though there's not a lot of variety, the way that it's used through different tones and carries through the entirety of the mansion, there's something a little bit like quirky and fun with it, but then it can also turn into being very tense and menacing, and I think that's really the greatest strength of the soundtrack.
So I think the thing that's interesting about that is you brought up something that I don't hear many people talk about, but that comes from the music being the way that it is. I feel like the way you feel about that music is great because that is exactly how Nintendo does music. It reminds me of the classic Mario days of, you know, the main theme of Mario from 1, 2, 3 World, of where it has a earworm and it's something that you'll definitely remember forever. Not only does Luigi singing the theme song, which is called diegetic music, which is something you've heard before. I feel like everybody that's talked about this game has brought that up. But I think that the thing that I want to bring up is it is a callback to how catchy Mario music is. It does feel still like the Mario universe, just creepy.
Exactly, and it's an absolute delight.
Well, cause see, you know what's funny about that is it has the same kind of ideas of like the doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo, and where like Luigi's Mansion's doo-doo-doo-doo, like it has that same kind of feeling that Mario has that I think is great to talk about realistically. Yes, it's creepy, and I think that it definitely still feels like a Mario game is all I'm trying to say. I also love the fast-paced feeling of catching ghosts. There's like a little, you know...
Oh, there's definitely a sense of urgency that is unparalleled. You get that also with like, say, like a Boo doing its little scream.
Oh boy,
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. Hang on, let me...
No, it's good, just continue.
You couple that with the sounds of the ghost's distress, and it really builds into this like, oh my god, I have to get this right now feeling.
I think something else that's very interesting about this game, also soundtrack wise, is it feels very modern Nintendo. There's like a lot of modern isms in it, and that might just be because like of Toyotaka, isn't he the guy that does the music for this one?
Yep.
And that might just be his little touches, but it feels very, and I say this because of like EGAD's little like, you know, theme and stuff. Like there's a lot of modern stuff to it that I feel is odd, weirdly enough, for how old EGAD is. But I don't know. I feel like all in all, the presentation musically is great, but I think that the visual aesthetics is also great there too. Now, I think one of the things is me and you did a disservice by not playing this game on an old-fashioned TV for the GameCube, because that might have been what made it better. And I think that that's kind of what sucks, is that without emulation, there is no real way, in truth, to kind of get that aesthetic that Luigi's Mansion and the GameCube wants. Like, I know that there are cables that allow you to do it, but those cables are, one, expensive unless they made aftermarkets, and if they did, I'll put an addendum in. But I feel like Luigi's Mansion is at a kind of disservice with modern day TVs, because they don't boost it well. And this is where Nintendo could definitely come in and re-release Luigi's Mansion on NSO if they ever do a GameCube one. Because I feel like maybe they should upscale it or do something with it that doesn't, like, and once again, I could just buy an old TV, for sure. But I feel like it kind of sucks to know that we don't get that same feeling. I mean, yes, the 3DS is perfect for that, but I don't know, even the 3DS does have some minor differences, so.
For sure.
Isn't the hall different?
Yes, the gallery that the portrait ghosts are displayed on is completely different. It was completely redesigned from the GameCube version. The angel statues were taken out, the whole layout makes it easier to see the portrait ghosts, but I feel like it loses the gallery vibe and just kind of becomes like EGAD's storage unit.
It feels like a museum that's more showy versus a personal collection.
Yeah, and I get that. And
there's no issue with that. There's absolutely none, but it is something that we should bring up.
Yeah, there are tiny differences between the 3DS and the GameCube version as far as like where things are and how things look. For the most part, things are the same. They're just upscaled.
For instance, one of the things that I thought was interesting is the Game Boy horror. Is one of those things of where I remember it just being kind of an animated Game Boy, but in reality, no, it's a photorealistic Game Boy, and they kept that in both versions. And it took us a minute to look at the GameCube version to go, oh crap, because you kind of take it for granted, which also kind of makes it a little creepier that there's a photorealistic Game Boy in Mario.
No, that is it. I do admit that is very unsettling to me. I don't know why, but there is something a bit uncanny about it.
And another thing is that Luigi is definitely different. And I think that might also just because I feel like Luigi's model is definitely different. And I think that just exists because we're talking about GameCube versus 3DS. The 3DS came at a time where definitely Luigi has been in 3D for a longer time, where GameCube just kind of, you had to...
We were just coming out of the N64 era, so 3D models were just starting to get a little more polished.
And so, I kind of understand why if you look at Luigi, he looks a little bit different, but... And that might even just be, I don't know, he just looks more on model in the 3DS version.
No, he definitely does.
No matter how you play it, it's a definite treat, but none of that really matters if you can't get your hands on the game.
So let's move on to the accessibility.
So Luigi's Mansion was only released on about 2 consoles, which were the GameCube and the 3DS. The GameCube version will set you back $50 to $60. There are a lot more expensive copies with a lot more stuff with it, but in reality, I feel like if you are looking for a reasonable price, you are going to pay about $50 to $60. That is reasonable. There are the hundreds, there are the whatevers, but you have to remember this is a GameCube game, so it inevitably is going to get expensive. The 3DS version, on the other hand, is kind of rare in a weird way, because looking it up always kind of invokes Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, because for some reason they just didn't call it Luigi's Mansion 2 in America, which I think would have actually helped out more to separate it for the 3DS. But you're going to pay about 50 on the higher side, but 30 something on the lower side, and these are even with the box. Now, I think that's really great for the price.
No, I agree. I think that having it at that price point is really great. I'm going to admit it, though. I'm going to be the first to say it. I'm just salty that it wasn't ported.
I definitely get that you're salty that it wasn't ported to the Switch or the Wii U back in the day. Let's say the Switch, realistically, because that was a better option. But then again, that kept happening, right? Like, we kept getting games on the consoles that really, you know what I mean? Because, the 3DS was definitely popular back in the day. I definitely get it. And in truth, I'm just surprised that this version is so low. If I could recommend anything, get the 3DS version if you are a collector, because that console is going to only go up in price as time goes on. It already has. It already is. So if you're looking for any 3DS games, I'd most definitely recommend selecting the 3DS version over the GameCube, because the GameCube's gonna, it might rise more and more, but I really doubt it.
Oh, yeah, no, for sure. But
it's had about almost 20-something years, almost.
Yeah, we're actually seeing an interesting divergence right now where the player's choice copies are becoming more expensive.
Which is weird.
Yeah, than the regular box, which is really weird, but hey, I'll take it. It wasn't that long ago that these copies went for $80 all the way around.
Yeah, so, all I'm really saying, though, is if you're out there trying to get your hands on the game in a collecting kind of space, and if there's one that you really should urgently get more of, and for a collector's reason, I think it's 3DS games. I don't know if 3DS games are ever going to hit that high, but you never really know. And I hope they don't. I hope that they're always kind of in the 30s and 40s. That'd be great.
I would love that.
Even lower, too, 20s. But, hey, it's whatever, I think that's great, at the end of the day. I do definitely understand that we wish it was on a home console, but I do think that having it on the 3DS was actually great. But we'll talk more about that in the goods and the bads. And actually, we'll talk about that in the next episode, because the next episode has so much to do with handhelds. So,
I guess with that being said, let's get into the goods and the bads.
So when it gets right down to it, I think Luigi's Mansion has a lot of good to talk about, specifically how it kind of just is vastly different than Mario spin-offs were.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. This game was such a unique entry in the Mario spin-offs, and I would argue, obviously it still is, but it just has so much to offer in in what it is.
So to kind of keep this in the spooky month kind of category, we already talked about how this game feels like kind of trick-or-treating, and I think that that's great. I think that it's really nice that we have a whole bunch of hardcore horror games, but I think that it'd be nice if we had some that are kind of in the lesser degree, and this one allows us to have that. Olivia, have you ever had like one of those McDonald's buckets that you got for Halloween as a kid? Yeah, have you noticed you're never gonna use them, but it's nice to have it?
Yeah.
And like it not being a thing that's given out. If you don't get one or if you don't see them, you go, oh man, that's kind of weird,
No, yeah, Halloween without a plastic bucket somewhere around is kind of naked feeling.
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of what this feels like, is that this feels like a nice little comfy game to play during that season if you don't want to get too spooked, which makes sense. I mean, to be fair here, some people like me just don't get spooked by horror games anymore because, like, the 2010s just went mad with like those kind of games. Let's be real here. With like games like Slender, Five Nights at Freddy's, and yada yada. The horror games mean nothing like they used to. Even then, before that, when I was growing up, Silent Hill and Resident Evil were definitely a thing. And you could say that those aren't scary now, but buddy, back in the day before we had the internet, that was a thing. So when Luigi's Mansion kind of comes in and gives you this nice and soft kind of slight horror, but like not too much, is nice. It's nice. It has a place.
No, for sure. As someone who was very sensitive to horror growing up, being easily frightened by a lot of things, Luigi's Mansion was just enough for me to be a little scared, but I could get through it okay. So I appreciate that from that point in my childhood, and enough where I love this game as an adult still.
I think one of the things also that's great about this game is the aesthetic, and unfortunately/fortunately, it's worth talking about, because Luigi's Mansion never hits these highs ever again. Luigi's Mansion definitely does have an aesthetic, and it's an aesthetic that I think gets better in the third one, but this aesthetic alone, though, is never repeated. And I think that that is very important.
I agree. This is something, if you know me, I have lamented the loss of in the future Luigi's Mansion titles. I love both of them. Well, I love all of the Luigi's Mansion titles, but this one it just hits so different. And I desperately miss how the portrait ghosts were treated in this game. I miss the weird little ghost we had. We never get these guys again.
Actually, we do, but not weirdly enough in a Mario title. We get it in Nintendo Land,
which is so weird to me. But yeah, I just think that the aesthetic of Luigi's Mansion really spoke volumes for this game, and I'm always going to treasure this one in particular.
Well, it definitely did, because it falls more into that kind of horror line, right? It felt more in that that horror place, where the other ones feel more like a trick-or-treating romp than this one does. But this one, okay, the best way to put this one in perspective is it's like that scary house, the one that was super decorated. You know it's safe, but it's still a little scary.
For sure.
The other games are the houses that have slight decorations, right?
Yeah. I don't know if this was just me. I always just kind of felt like a lot of this game kind of fit. I see where it would not fit with the Mario aesthetic, but I always felt like this fit a little bit closer. Like the boos didn't look as out of place.
I actually disagree. I think that this one, and I think that that's what's strong about it, is it's like Yoshi's Island. It's like Super Princess Peach or Showtime or Toad's game, where it diverges but has one thing that's familiar, and that is Luigi. The ghosts aren't familiar, but other stuff isn't familiar. Egad isn't even familiar. But I think that that's what makes it great, is that it isn't that way. That's the great thing about the Mario spin-offs, is the fact that they are familiar through one character and they get you out of your comfort zone with others. For instance, King Boo had to dramatically be changed. It just used to be a big Boo. Now it's this Boo with these sunken in eyes, and he looks stressed all the time. And to be fair here, I would too if my worst enemy was a vacuum. But, you know, I think that that's what's great about it. I also think another great thing about this one is that it's one of the few spin-offs where you have to save Mario. Actually, multiple times, weirdly enough. But it's one where it does that, and I think that that's really nice and really great, and I think it's fun to have that as a concept, you know what I mean?
Yeah, especially because in this particular execution of this game, saving Mario is so interesting because you genuinely kind of feel Luigi's distress. Also, I'm going to say, as since this is the good category, I love the Mario button. It is completely pointless, but I love it.
I think one other thing I want to also add about this one is this is the game that kind of made Luigi's character. Luigi definitely was not consistent. Yes, I get it. Now, if you're in Japan and somebody's like, well, in Japan, his character was always this way. I'm from America. I'm sorry. I have no clue if that's true. And if it is, you know what I mean? I don't know. But this is the game that made people think of Luigi as the scaredy cat brother. I know that he was a scaredy cat in the Super Mario Brothers Super Show, but to take that as canon is weird because in the OVA that happened not a couple years ago, but you know what I mean? In the OVA, Luigi came off as kind of a little bit more greedy or reluctant, but not scared, right?
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until the Super Show where he kind of got scared, but even then I don't know if he's because the thing that's funny is it seems like the media doesn't put him as scared of everything else. He's just scared of ghosts, right?
Yeah.
And this is the game that kind of made that a thing of where he's more scared of ghosts and kind of a brave character now in other situations.
Yeah, I think it balanced out well, and it managed to show Luigi's personality in a really fun way, and I think it really paved the road for, like, kind of started to tie together those various interpretations of this, which we see also in, like, the Paper Mario games and these other extra pieces of media.
With that also being said, Luigi is a scaredy cat of ghosts, but he also is just brave enough to go through it. You know, there's never a time in the game where Luigi feels like he's not gonna go through it. He's just reluctantly going through. Luigi's going through it, you know? So,
yep.
I don't know. I feel like this game just did a really good job at giving character. And, you know, it also just is a game that feels cohesive as well, because we see more of Egad's inventions after this one happens. Egad becomes a character here. We see one of his inventions in Mario Sunshine. We see some of his inventions in the Mario RPGs later, you know? Egad becomes a staple, and I think that that's very interesting.
I just think that overall, Luigi's Mansion had a lot to offer as far as being a good game, but
that's all good and dandy. There is some bads to be talked about. With that being said, let's move on to the bads.
Of course.
So I don't have a lot of bad to say about this game, but the one thing that if I have to say is it definitely feels like aiming is kind of bad.
Yeah, the aiming is the only thing I would really complain about, just because I don't know what it is. I always blame my own depth perception, but there is something a little wonky about the way you have to aim in this game.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I'm not saying that there's not more than one bad thing. There's other bad things within this game, but I feel like one, that comes down to opinion.
Yeah,
for some of them, and two, I feel like the 3DS does kind of settle it to a degree for some things, like, you know, clunky controls or whatever. I feel like it is solved a little bit with the 3DS release. And even then, I don't feel like most of the stuff that I consider as bad in this game are bad, because it gets into that weird territory, kind of like, this fits like a Metroid video game, of where it's like, you can sit and nitpick things, but then you also have to remember what game you're playing, right?
For sure.
For instance, I can say that the movement's a little clunky. For sure, but what are we gonna do about that? A remake would probably help that feel better, and the DS one does feel better. So I don't feel like sitting here and talking about the GameCube version shortcomings, because that's not what this show is about. Yes, it is something that if the GameCube version was the only one on the market, yes, I would say that it's clunky, but there is other things that possibly could be talked about with that, because there is another option. There is that A and B, the strafing or whatever that was called.
Yeah, the sidestep controls.
Yeah, there is that. So that is definitely a remedy at the end of the day.
Yeah, the only other thing I could maybe say is that this game is like a tiny bit unforgiving as far as your treasure collecting.
See, but that's where I disagree with you once again, because the 3DS version definitely solves that. It's a lot more generous than the GameCube version is. And once again, I feel like this game has been out on the market long enough that that is common knowledge. It's something that you know, I feel like one of the greatest things about living in the time we're in now is that if you feel like something's cheap, you can just go, is Luigi's Mansion unfair? And you'll get answers. Right?
For sure.
So, or is it me or is it hard to keep money or whatever? We live in this time where it's easier and we're more connected than we used to be. So I feel like that's kind of common knowledge, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but that's one of the things that I've heard about the most with this game is it's difficult to hold money. But while playing the 3DS version, it seems to be the exact opposite. It seems...
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna hold that against the classic version. I'm just saying.
I know, I get it. I get it. But I feel like that's the older conversation coming out.
For sure.
I feel like that's something that we would have talked about on the playground back in the day, but or something we would have talked about before the 3DS version came out.
For sure.
But I feel like with that version being out, it's kind of a moot point because I feel like, and even then, that might be harder to hold money too. We just might be better at the 3DS version. Who knows?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I agree with you. I see you, especially since it's important to the ending. But I think that there is ways around it, and I think that it's not that big of a deal now. I think it's something that most people going into this game are prepared for. It's not fresh like it used to be.
Yeah, for sure. So in all reality, there's very little to hold against this game.
There's a lot, but it comes down to the question of, is this your type of game or not, versus is it actually bad?
Fair enough.
With that being said though,
let's move on to our final thoughts.
So when it gets right down to it, does Luigi's Mansion hold up today?
Absolutely.
I think, yeah, I think it does. I do think that there are some things that we didn't talk about, which is kind of the issue with these kind of episodes with guests, because you can get wrapped up in things. But I think that all in all, yeah, I think that it holds up. I think one of the things that's hard for me to recommend this game, and it's something that only can exist in the final thoughts, is the fact that Luigi's Mansion only gets better and better. The fact that I can see somebody looking back at Luigi's Mansion 1 and going, actually, we had an issue with this. Our child was watching us play this, and he's so used to watching 3 and even 2 that sucking up ghosts just kind of is a because, you know, in 2 there's a faster kind of thing. There's a power suction that happens, and in 3 you're just able to beat the living shit out of ghosts.
He likes the more rough and tumble versions of catching ghosts.
And to be fair here, that feels great, but we'll get into that in the Luigi's Mansion 3 episode. But I kind of see where that comes in, and I feel like maybe it would be cool to see one more remake of Luigi's Mansion 3, or even the whole one in, I guess I can't say 2 because 2 already got one, but I think it would be cool to kind of get like a Resident Evil, like an RE2 style remake, you know what I mean? Where there is gameplay tweaks, where you have the choice to kind of do that. And they already did that in the original one, right? With the 3DS, they had those kind of fixes. Like you're able to do the strobe flashlight. So I think it'd be really cool if you could, and it would have to be, it wouldn't be Luigi's Mansion 1 anymore. It'd have to be a hardcore remake of Luigi's Mansion 1. It'd have to be Luigi's Mansion 1 remake.
For sure.
So, in other words, it doesn't count here.
No, yeah, but I think it's undeniable that this first game offered such a unique experience full of such charm and kind of creepy vibes, and I think there's something so... it was a lightning in a bottle moment, but I'm so glad that the franchise has continued forward and grown into its own.
And hey, they definitely caught lightning one more time. So, I mean, hey, it's not like a lightning that can't be caught twice.
For sure.
With that being said, though, let me add one more thing about this, though. This game did do something that the others didn't really do that much, and that is the elemental kind of stuff. It's there in the other games to a degree, to a way lesser degree, but I think that that's kind of the reason why you come back to it, is to see these experimental things, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying, and I want this to be clear, I'm not saying that it not being as flashy as Luigi's Mansion 3 is what makes it not worth it, because you will definitely find it fun, especially since there is a strategy to it, and this is the first game, and also playing this one will definitely get you to get the handle of the next games, and also playing this one also helps you appreciate the future, because we could have just been boring, right?
No, yeah, it's one of those things of this is like you brought up in previous episodes, this was an amazing starting point, and it only got better. I miss certain old things about this game, but
in truth, I agree with you. I think one of the things that never comes back, they kind of flirt with it, but it just does not come back, is the Portrait Ghosts, sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know that they don't need to come back. I think that the other games, I can't say which one because that'll spoil the episode, but the other games do definitely flirt with larger than life types of ghosts, but I don't think they ever hit the mark as much as the Portrait Ghosts do, and I'm kind of happy that this one is the one to have that. Looking back at this game now, that's the reason why you should come back to this game, because they did stray far away from this. The aesthetic, the Portrait Ghosts, the pretty much music, everything does not carry over to the next games, and I think that that's what will always be what makes this game great. Yes, I pitched a remake, but that's just because I'd like to see something like that. Heck, I don't honestly want a remake because I'm sick of remakes, but
Yeah, but this game was endearingly grim, somewhat creepy, and ultimately just a fun experience. And it just will always be that way, I think, for me, and hopefully for other people who choose to enjoy this game.
hey, it was even worth it for me. It's one of those games that I've completely turned around on, because even though I'm saying that I prefer the other games, I don't know, there's something about this one that'll make me come back to it, especially since it is on a portable console now.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
That does make a big difference.
So, with that being said, though, what is your favorite Nintendo spinoff? So when it gets right down to it, I have to say that Mario Kart is one of my favorite spinoffs. It's one of the ones that I've really, really enjoyed, and I just really enjoy Mario Kart. When I think of it, that's what I think come to mind. I don't know if that really counts as a spinoff, but I think it does. So what's yours?
Honestly, but if I'm not talking about Luigi's Mansion, because Luigi's Mansion is one of my favorite spin-offs, I'm gonna go with there's some really solid Pokemon spin-offs that come to mind. I really enjoyed. Well, I better hold it until I replay that one.
Well, just say it. It doesn't matter.
Pokemon Coliseum.
Oh yeah. Well, we'll see you next year for that, huh?
Yeah. But you know what I'm gonna say today? I am going to bring up the Oh, it was in my brain and now it's gone.
Well, that being said, we're just going to leave it at Coliseum. With that being said, please subscribe and check out Out of Ink. They'll be here this whole Halloween, so.
Yep, I'll be here all for the Luigi's Mansion Marathon. So, see you next time, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.